Last episode, we talked about the Golden Rule and just explored its roots and history and a little bit of religious foundations and not so religious foundations of the Golden Rule, why it works, and, looking at it from sort of Western and Eastern philosophies, how to apply the Golden Rule into, sort of the construct of the isms that have come before, such as capitalism and socialism and Marxism and, communism. Like, how does this new Golden Rule-ism fit into the socioeconomic structures? We're going to explore that and more in today's episode of The Culmination. Let's go. Okay, so this is where we close the loop, as it were, to the whole concept of Golden Rule economics. And that's the whole reason why we were talking about it and had to really give the foundation to it in the last episode, is because this is where we're going to kind of tie it all together. Evaluating actions as strictly good or bad in an absolute fashion, which would provide the greatest benefit for the most facets of life. Number one is survival as an individual, as self, being healthy and strong as a person without consideration of others, so just as an individual. Number two is a family. Number three would be, within the groups and teams, whether it's work or church or, your baseball team, then also looking at, as society, mankind, humanity as a whole, all living things, all non-living things, the spiritual nature of man and God. These are all the facets of life that people are striving to be able to survive. And so what would be the greatest benefit for all of those facets of life that would allow you to, I think, live a rewarding life and existence? Well, all too often, destructive acts in business are committed because the end justifies the means. Have you ever heard that term before, the end justifies the means? Well, I don't think that if you really understood what the end was, that it would justify, that your actions would justify the means, right? So for example, a company operating in a foreign country strips cobalt mines and employs thousands of children under the age of 10, as an example, right? Doing so provides the raw materials to manufacture the latest and greatest electronic devices for the wealthy in a global society. Because, quote unquote, we all need our cell phones and our computers, right? This is the mindset that we have, is that we have to have these things. Such a mindset, though, makes it easy to consider that someone else's existence has nothing to do with them because it's too far removed. When a person decides to approve a harmful drug or create a weapon of mass destruction, or exact some death upon millions of people because they're in another country, thereby justifying war crimes, that person, no matter how right they may appear, will wind up being in a position where those scales will balance with a vengeance long term. What do I mean by this? This means that whatever horrible, evil thing, someone commits, and this brings to mind that movie, with Michael Keaton. What was that? Dope Sick, right? Dope Sick. And Dope Sick was a really interesting movie because of the fact that, there was this justification of bringing this very, very dangerous drug to market. But you could see how that pharmaceutical family really had it very well justified. Like it was very easy to explain away why it was okay to addict the entire nation, if they could, to a very, very dangerous drug, in that situation. So in that way, you think, oh, they made millions of dollars and, they got away with it to a certain degree, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, they had to pay back, lawsuits and whatever. But more so than that, there is a long-term payback that's exacted upon someone that commits heinous atrocities in that order of magnitude. So until we as a society begin to realize that the furthest person away from us is actually connected to us, we won't choose the right way. If I live in Los Angeles, I need to realize that I am connected to an indigenous person living in the Australian outback, meaning that I'm connected to them. I'm connected to an Inuit in the tundra of the Arctic Circle, right? I'm connected to tribes people living in Central Africa, and I'm connected to rice farmers in Asia, right? We are all interconnected. everything that I do in some way, shape, or form has an effect on others, no matter how distant they may seem. And this comes back to the concept of the butterfly effect, is that a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, causes, a snowstorm in Siberia, right? The fact is that every action that we take interplays with everyone else and sets wheels in motion. And we have to remember that we are all interconnected. That is one of the foundational, fundamental concepts of golden rule economics, is that we're all interconnected. When we see that our good deeds done today in our local sphere improve the lives of everyone, no matter how distant, thereby improving our lives, we will make correct decisions. Okay? So when we know that the decisions that we make on a local scale, right, have an impact and an influence on a grander scale, this and that effect will wind up coming back to us in some way, shape, or form. This starts to dictate the way that we take actions in the future. So how do we apply this concept of the golden rule? Well, these are some of the concepts that go through my mind that drive my conduct personally. Right? I see destruction occurring and think, oh man, I don't want that to happen to me. So I better keep pushing good out in the world, do positive things, be charitable, and try to conduct myself decently. People would call me because I'm a business owner and I'm relatively successful in my, career path. And they say, oh, this guy's a capitalist. But I will tell you this right now, from the very early stages of my life, I've always done my best to be somewhat of actually an environmentalist. It's like I pick up trash. I've actually gone on trash pickups in my neighborhood to try and clean things. I think that, some of the projects that are out there, like the whole cleaning up of the Pacific garbage patch, I think that is some of the most awesome stuff that we should be contributing to. Why? Because I know that by contributing to these things that make the lives easier for other life forms, whether it's people or living things or whatever, that will come back to me many times over if I just do good things out in the world. So in reality, though, all of us have flaws and all of us make poor decisions, so I've made poor decisions as well. But I believe, though, that every decision, whether poor or not, is made from an underlying desire to increase our capacity to survive. Just a broadening of the scope of one's interactions with one's fellows and humankind as a whole starts to guide our choices. If we can just do our part to make the world a smaller place, meaning that we understand that we are all part of one big family, regardless of our background, regardless of our beliefs, regardless of, our skin color, regardless of our upbringing, if we start to understand that, then we understand that we have more similarities than we have differences, and that should start to guide our choices in interacting with one another. If you examine the golden ruleism of conduct from a government or corporate capacity, so let's look at this from the point of view as a government or a corporate entity treating others how they'd want to be treated. Well, there's always going to be someone who's got to be responsible, that's heading up those things in order to be able to guide the decision-making processes of those entities, whether a corporation or a government. You'll see that some societies do a better job than others in this regard. Some very local, close-knit cultures or tribes have come to conclusions over many generations that increase survival. Right? They've literally gone, hey, this thing wasn't working. We got to throw that out and we got to move in a completely different direction. Some of the rules and traditions they're carrying forward may look ridiculous and insane to someone on the outside of that particular tribe or group, but these were decisions and traditions created with a purpose. I think that the United States is probably one of the lowest trust societies. Like, you don't want to leave your car unlocked. You don't want to leave your keys in the ignition. In some places, if you're out in the sticks, you just leave your car unlocked, leave your keys in the ignition. Nobody's going to do anything. It doesn't matter. You're in a high trust environment within a society, but as a whole, you definitely wouldn't want to do that. But I look at some of the societies that are out there. Japan is one of them. I went to Japan. I thought Japan was incredible. When I was a little kid, I just remember that there was this golden statue on a street corner next to a lamppost, And it was probably, I don't know, it was like, it was yay big. It wasn't that big. It was like about this big or so, maybe about a foot in height. And I just remember being 7 years old in Japan just thinking to myself, I live in Seattle. I was like, that statue would be in someone's trunk right now, and just the fact that me as a 7-year-old kid had the thought that someone would take that, like already that's starting the degradation of a trust society and moving it to a low trust society. So a high trust society is a society where you can put things out there and no one's going to take them and everyone respects the ownership of others, to a low trust society where you think everyone is going to, steal that if they were given the chance, whether you do it or not. So some people are degrade or denigrate these types of customs and moral structures. They see these people as less than themselves and therefore justify harming or killing them because they have a different, they go, oh, well, these people, they're so stupid because they, have a trust society. Well, shame on you for trusting me. I'm going to kill you, right? Very, very bad way of coming to and drawing conclusions. I believe that attitude extends to semi-intelligent animals, meaning I believe the attitude of treating others the way you'd want to be treated extends to semi-intelligent animals. Whales, for example, right? They were slaughtered wholesale for generations to yield meat, blubber, bones, and other raw materials. Yet now we're discovering that whales, dolphins, octopi, and other fairly intelligent, animals, right? They're intelligent to the point that they can communicate. If anyone took the time to sit down and create a language with which we could converse, we would, and probably would, refrain from eating our neighbors as snacks. Another example is gorillas. Obviously, gorillas are not creating microchips or rockets to Mars, but they're able to have real conversations. We've all seen, circulating on the internet, the videos about Coco, the gorilla who once had become close to Robin Williams. When she overheard one of her handlers talking about Robin Williams having died, Coco became very sad, right? And this is just an example of the emotional state of animals. Such examples might make a person think twice about destroying such a sentient being's environment to have more wood for their fancy finish on their luxury car, right? And so to me, I look at it and I do feel like there's a sort of a hierarchical structure. And I say this, selfishly so, is that I like to eat meat. I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian, but at the same time, I also understand that there's ways that we could interact with, the animal kingdom that is much better than it is the way that we're doing it right now, And so when you begin to see that life is actually interconnected and that every decision you make, good or bad, either increases or decreases the survival capacity of the world as a whole, you start making very different choices. That's the whole point of golden rule economics, is figuring out the choices as an individual. If you're in charge of a company, if you're in charge of a country, you must treat the people within your sphere of influence, whether they're your citizens or they're your employees, you must treat them the same way that you would want to treat them as individuals. Right? That's where I think that governments and companies break down, is when they start treating, people as groups and not as individuals, that you start to have a breakdown in the structure, because then you can absolutely disconnect from the decisions that you're making and make bad decisions and justify it. Why are these industries just inherently, seemingly they can't get away from destroying things that they touch? A few standout examples are big pharma, big food, and big tech. Profit becomes the deciding statistic by which their success is judged. And then if profit becomes the deciding statistic, then it's easy for them to be able to, to massage the palms of the lobbyists with a few bucks here and there and influence, the governments in order to be able to get things approved that otherwise wouldn't be approved. And I'm just talking in broad strokes. I'm not talking about anything in particular. But the point is that this sort of accelerated deterioration, this cronyism, as it were, this needs to be moved away from. And people that are in those positions of power need to realize that they are making decisions that will come back to haunt them long term in this life or the next. So keeping in line with the golden rule of treat others how you'd want to be treated, I will tell you this. If I were watching your channel, I'd give you a follow. I'd give you a subscribe. I'd put some comments in there. I'd hit that like button, and I make sure that I turned on notifications to make sure that we knew when the next episodes were dropping. I really appreciate you. Sincerely, I do. And I really appreciate the fact that you decided to spend some time with me in today's episode of the Coleman Nation. See you guys at the top. Take care.